Hello, unexplained ones. This is Dr. Mountain, and welcome back to All Things Unexplained. This episode, we are so pleased to be joined by astrophysicist Massimo Teodorani. He is the author of The Physics of the Impossible Possible, 6 Theoretical Physics Models for Anomalous Aerial Phenomena, Wormholes, Brains, Plasma, and Beyond. We're going to talk about his scientific approach to UAPs, the Hessdalen lights, the Brown Mountain lights, wormholes, and so much more. But first, if you could grab the subscribe button, we do weekly content on UFOs, Bigfoot, aliens, astrophysics, and everything in between. And yes, it's absolutely free. So if you're into those kinds of things and you want to support the channel, hit that sub button, leave a comment down below, and that will automatically enter you into our giveaways. And we have a lot of exciting things to give away. Just be a sub to All Things Unexplained. Leave a comment if you want. Stick around to the end of the video and we'll get into all the giveaway stuff again there. And now, here's Larry.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
Did the CIA write Wind of Change by the Scorpions?
As humans busied themselves about the various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
With infinite complacence, people went about their affairs, yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast and unsympathetic threw their plans against us.
All of a sudden, a stick out of nowhere landed right in front of us, and there was no tree, nothing overhead. Something threw it at us.
Yeah. What's your hot take on Travis Taylor?
I've got an exclusive for you guys if you want it about the Alaska.
We do.
Okay.
Dr. Taylor was revealed to be the chief scientist of the UAP task force with the Pentagon.
All Things Unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
So, Massimo, welcome to All Things Unexplained. It's so good to have you this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And I kind of want to get started with this, Massimo. So for listeners who are unfamiliar with your work, you're an astrophysicist. What pulled you into UAP?
Yeah, good question. Well, I have to tell you that even before studying astronomy, I was interested with the UFOs, also because I had some experiences myself, so I was curious. And when I was very well settled methodologically with up to my PhD level, I started to think that the best way to study the phenomenon is to study it in the same way in which we study celestial objects, in which we study stars, galaxies, namely using something like portable telescopes, CCD sensors, spectrograph, because this kind of phenomena, especially when they are luminous at night, because this is the part in which I'm specialized, they can be treated exactly like a celestial object, of which we can analyze very precisely the photons in all wavelength that are coming. And so through the analysis of the photons, we can understand exactly what are we dealing about, okay? Independently from the witness case that sometimes can be useful to guide us in locating the instruments in very specific areas in case. In particular, there are some locations in the world such as Hessdalen in Norway, but not only Hessdalen, but also Cape Fear River in North Carolina, in your nation, or Yakima, Marfa, Brown Mountain, even the Catalina Island, where this kind of phenomenon appear very often. So it's a good idea to install instruments permanently, or sometimes for some time, like 2-3 weeks, to try to acquire measurements of this phenomena, so that we can treat them totally scientifically and try to submit then papers after we have done our calculations on the data to peer-reviewed journals. So I tried to do that. Something have been published to peer-reviewed journals and congresses, conferences, and so on. So this is the philosophy. The philosophy was substantially, just after my PhD, I told, well, I am very trained with telescope. Why not apply this experience to this kind of phenomena at placing the instruments, portable instruments, clearly not big telescopes in this case, at locations where the phenomenon occurs very often. And so I fell into the Hessdalen thing, which since 30 years is continuing interest, as an external collaborator of Professor Erling Strand and also other people.
Right. You know, Massimo, there was some interesting synchronicity that happened just now, because you mentioned something that everyone around where I live is familiar with. The All Things Unexplained Studios is in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, central North Carolina. And just literally down the road from me is something the entire state is familiar with, and that's the Brown Mountain Lights. And you brought up a case which, honestly, I don't know anybody that's familiar with, except for a few people on X, and I certainly wasn't familiar with it, and that's the Hessdalen lights. And I actually pulled up, I'm not sure the source of this photograph, but here's a photograph of
Hessdalen. It's Hessdalen.
Hessdalen lights,
2007,
right?
It was taken by Professor Björn Gitle Hauge in 2007. Yes.
Wow, amazing. But then I decided I want to find some photographs of the Brown Mountain lights. And here, I mean, the news media goes down there to Brown Mountain. Just all kinds of people go and they'll see them and photograph them. And I think this is a very similar looking phenomenon in this photograph. This is a Brown Mountain. I know our listeners may not be familiar with the Hessdalen case. Can you explain what exactly are the
They are very
Hessdalen
similar.
lights?
Their behavior is extremely similar to the Brown Mountain lights. Namely, it's something that is behaving, moving in the sky randomly. There are several kinds of lights, and it seems that everything starts with sort of flashes in the sky. So something that is lasting 1 microsecond, okay? And then these lights appear. They move sometimes randomly, sometimes they stand still up to 1 hour. They can stand still for 1 hour, often very close to the ground, as I documented. And they are several colors, mostly white, sometimes red and blue. And sometimes they are multiple lights that move together, giving the impressions sometimes that in some cases these lights are attached to a solid object. At least this was the impression of the Norwegian researchers in 1984, when the phenomenon practically exploded, okay? And they were the first one. Professor Erling Strand in particular was the first one to demonstrate to the world that this kind of phenomenon can be measured, especially at areas where it is very recurrent. And so they behave in that way. Sometimes there is also, it appears like a natural phenomenon. Imagine a big ball lightning that is in dimension, can be many meters, sometimes 10 meters, up to 10 meters, and it's lasting up to 2 hours. What I witnessed myself in my 5 missions in the area is the phenomenon is pulsating very fastly with less than 1 second practically. So the light is going on and off all the time. And sometimes something else is seen in Hessdalen, something really structured. So flying machines, apparently they're that. I cannot say these are aliens. We have no proof about that. It could be a military experiment of some kind, but sometimes there something that is not looking like a natural phenomenon. Most of the time, it looks like a kind of natural phenomenon. You know, like fireflies that are seen. When you see fireflies, they have those movement. Imagine that you see them much bigger, and so there is an overlap. Sometimes I would say 10% of the cases of this structure phenomena over the more general luminous phenomenon, which is probably natural and which is triggered by some electricity causes in the valley and augmented by the fact that there are a highly conductive element in the ground, such as copper, for instance, and other elements. In fact, the area was in the past full of caves. So there were many mines there that have been abandoned. So also some researchers from France, from Greece, together with the Norwegians ones, not me in this case, were able to determine the very strong electrical conductivity on the ground. So clearly there is a natural trigger. The fact that are seen sometimes apparent vehicles are seen in the sky, we don't know the reason, but we have a video that showed that was taken by an automatic camera from Hessdalen, which I can show if you want. I don't know if it. I can. You can, if you can see my screen. This video shows how this there is apparently structured light. At some point, a little light enters inside. So it seems there is a connection between a kind of structured phenomenon and these light balls, these spheres. You see, at some point, it enters inside. I show you again. So this is, in my opinion, the most important video that was taken thanks to the capability of Erlingstrand and his student with the camera. So there are also several instruments. This is something that I took in Hessdalen. This is a kind of triple light that is very close to the tree, at the treetop practically. In one case, I was able to measure the power, luminous power. It was around 20 kilowatt. And these lights tend sometimes to change shape totally. And I will show to you how, in a bigger resolution photo, I was able to measure its light luminosity. You can see it goes up and down. In the beginning, just like if it's a boat that is not able to turn on, but then it turns on and remains stable for a certain time. Spectra are very strange because they show peaks similar to LED lights. To show you better what it happened in 2001, I was with my colleagues and some technicians, was that at some point we saw a light This one, and this is coming from a professional camera, which started to move. There were two lights. At some point, it changed shape, exactly like a rectangle, surrounded
Oh,
by a sort of a rainbow effect. And at some
like an
point,
aura of some sort.
yes, at some point, there were some little balls around that were around this rectangle. Okay, I consider that this is not pixelation at all, because inside you don't have 4 pixels, you have 200 or 300 pixels. So this is not even a problem of the diaphragm of the camera, because there is no diaphragm that is rectangular. There are kind of diaphragm that have a triangular shape and give the impression that you have seen a triangular UFO, but it's not. It's an effect of the camera. But in this case, absolutely not. So this is an overview, just to give an idea of what we see in Hessdalen. And yes, you can keep on asking me or whatever you want.
Well, those were amazing. The video was amazing. The photographs you showed were amazing, because I was going to ask you, did you think that these changes in shapes, well, first of all, are people seeing that visually with their eyeballs, or was it just noticed on camera and video?
Well, we saw the lights, of course, one day. It was a very wet, humid day, um, but it was very far away. Okay, so the photo that I've shown you, the snapshot I've shown you, is the result of the zooming, maximum zooming of the camera that we had. But we were looking with our own lights, clear, but it was very small, very quite teeny, but very luminous. Okay.
Right. Well, and you mentioned some other sensors. So besides photographs and video, so
Yeah.
cameras, that sort of thing, what other types of sensors are these
Yes.
lights showing up on?
Yes, there were sensors that were shared between me, my group of the National Research Council, and the Norwegian project Hessdalen, at that time from the Ostfold University College. There is an stable observatory there. At same time in which we were measuring, we were taking photo and doing something else, videos of this object, that observatory, which is called Hessdalen Interactive Observatory, or Blue Box, was measuring the magnetic field. So there was a magnetometer, there was a radar, and there was a spectrum analyzer that we had in two wavelength ranges. One was in the VLF range. VLF means something like around 1,000 kilohertz, practically. So they are very long wavelength. Okay, and the other one was a microwave spectrometer that works on the gigahertz. So these are very high frequency and very short wavelength. So sometimes there were some simultaneity, some others there was not. Sometimes we also had another radar that was a meteorological, not atmospheric radar, that was showing tracks that was not visible, or nothing visible. And the opposite, it was happening. Sometimes there was a phenomenon which was not tracked by the radar. So there was a intermittent radar behavior, which is a common thing, a common behavior in the case of the UFO phenomenon, which
Right.
was seen by the Norwegians, but it has been seen by also other witnesses, pilot, control tower operators. And due to that, I wanted to make a theoretical, more deep theoretical research, and this is a recent thing. It's technical mathematical research, which is on my research gate, by the way, in the same place where there is my book. There are also the others after it, and the idea is substantially that if you have a huge and thick plasma envelope around the craft, okay, you would have something very luminous in the sky. We would see something very luminous, because if there is a plasma around the craft, the only way to keep it self-contained around the craft is to use a very strong magnetic field that is confining the plasma. Okay, so a very strong magnetic field that could be caused by strong electric fields on superconductive surface of the object, if it is an object, because we have two kinds of phenomena here. We have one kind of pure plasma phenomena similar to ball lightning, which is probably natural, and from which we do not expect very strong magnetic field, something that is less than 1,000th of 1 Tesla. Okay, so something 1,000 Gauss. And the other phenomenon could be artificial, and where the magnetic field is artificial, and we would expect at least 1 Tesla, or sometimes also up to 100 Tesla, namely 100 million Gauss. Okay, but we don't know that. So the only way to understand this is to make an attempt to measure spectra. We already took spectra in Hessdalen. I took with low resolution, because we didn't have the opportunity to use higher resolution. But due to calculations, due to the knowledge of the physical plasma physics theory, we know that when a plasma is immersed in a very strong magnetic field, if the magnetic field is really very strong, at least 1 Tesla up to 100 Tesla, spectral lines, if visible, in a particular thermal situation, spectral lines, when they are plotted on a graph that gives the intensity of the line versus wavelength, these lines are not peak, but they are double peaked. They are split in two parts. The separation of the two peaks will give, through a very simple formula, the intensity of the magnetic field. We call this Zeeman effect. We want to measure the Zeeman effect. And if we find that there is a Zeeman effect using high resolution spectrograph, so very expensive instruments that we don't have yet, have never been used, then we have a confirmation that what we observe is not pure plasma, but it's a machine, a flying machine. Not only that, but assuming that we are monitoring the object simultaneously with several other instruments like magnetometer, radar, spectrometer, high-speed camera or something, through the variation of the parameters that we measure from these different multi-wavelength instruments, we might understand something about the propulsion mechanism of the object. And due to that, I would like to show you, because this is wording, and this is the plan of a multi-wavelength observatory plan. For instance, in phase 1, we are going to test how it works. So we would put an electromagnetic surveillance system with a VLF, ELF spectrometer, a magnetometer, a radar, and a weather station. At the same time, all sky camera that is scanning the sky, and we would put this camera in 2-3 different positions of a specific area, like Cape Fear River, which I'm
Right.
very interested in that at present, at a distance of at least 1 kilometer, so that we, through triangulation, we can determine the distance of the phenomenon. After we know the distance of the phenomenon, and after we measure the luminous intensity in several wavelengths simultaneously, then we can calculate the intrinsic intensity, because photons intensity diminishes with the inverse of the square of the distance. If we know the distance, we know the intrinsic intensity. At the same time, artificial intelligence is able to identify anomalies after eliminating prosaic causes like airplanes, bugs, insects, birds, meteorites, whatever. So it has been instructed. At this point, if it finds a particular anomaly in the sky, it will give an order to a high definition zoom camera, which is called the pan tilt system, is guided to the target in order to obtain a high definition image of the object, okay, and also how it changes in intensity. After we are sure that this system works, then we pass to phase 2. And phase 2 means that we add something more, namely a high resolution spectrograph, which goes with the same kind of pan tilt system towards the target in order to acquire high resolution spectra, and so being able to obtain possibly the measurement of a magnetic field through the Zeeman effect that I told before. In subsequent phases, we add infrared systems, FLIR, and other systems that are very important, like high-speed camera. High-speed camera is extremely important because we assume that to observe at 1000 frames per second, it's optimum. We could go even more, but then the resolution, space resolution is too low for us. So 1000 frames per second, and we could use a zoom lens, which you can set up as a wide angle lens in order to catch in the sky very fast movement that the eye wouldn't be able to catch. So through the kinematics, we can make important measurements, in case also on possible propulsion mechanism, or if it is a natural phenomenon, its own movement, okay. Or if we use a zoom option, like 300 millimeter or 500 millimeter to the object, we could see if there is a fast variation of the light, as we already observed, and then try to understand something about the propulsion mechanism through that. So what I mean is that we can understand the physics of the phenomenon, whatever it is, natural phenomenon or not, through the way in which it is changing its parameters, in which it is varying with time in all wavelength. That's the only way to understand from the physics point of view. And it's the same philosophy that we use when we study astrophysical objects that are very variable, like the nuclei of quasars, like some variable stars, and so on. At the same time, we would use VHF, UHF, so microwave spectrometer, which can be very important if there is a case of plasma surrounding an object, a particle detector, because a strong magnetic field is able to accelerate particle, high energy particle, which we could detect. And so we would have an additional element, okay? And then laser, to stimulate the phenomenon, a gravimeter to see if there is a gravitational effect. And about that, I did several other calculations that, if there is time, I will speak about. So this is the philosophy of of the research.
Oh, incredible. One thing I love about that is that I believe that in pursuit of what could be an unnatural phenomenon, along the way, you can find out a lot of new science about natural phenomenon that we
Absolutely.
don't understand. And I think that you're setting yourself up for that sort of success there. And by the way, I am so pleased to be joined again by Dr. Massimo Teodorani this morning.
Thank you.
And he is the author of a book that is free right now on ResearchGate, and that is The Physics of the Impossible Possible by Dr. Massimo Teodorani. 6 theoretical physics models for anomalous aerial phenomena, wormholes, brains, plasma, and beyond. Massimo, one thing I actually wanted to ask you in regards to these Hessdalen lights or other lights, have you noticed other phenomena that are associated or happening at the same time, such as earthquakes or anything else?
Good question. Yes. Oh, no, not in Hessdalen. And maybe at another place in central Italy, much south of where I am in North Italy, there was some seismic shock. Not at the exact time we saw a phenomenon, okay, but I would say the same day. And this is a very good question because some kind of plasma light phenomena, so pure plasma, are triggered by the so-called piezoelectricity. And this happens when there is quartz underground, but also other very strong minerals like granite, for instance. When there is an earthquake, they crash against each other. And they behave like a piezoelectric lighter, literally. They liberate voltage in the atmosphere and they can ionize air, creating luminosity in the air, but not typically light balls. Because there is a point that you did also a very good observation before. It's very important to study the natural phenomenon per se. Why? The biggest mystery of this kind of natural phenomena is that if a plasma forms in the atmosphere, like the one that could be triggered by piezoelectricity from the ground through a seismic shock, this kind of phenomenon is what we see. Sometimes we see diffused lights that you can see some days or even some weeks before an earthquake or after the earthquake, but they are diffused lights, okay? But sometimes we see light balls that are self-contained. When you have a plasma in the atmosphere, it tends immediately to expand because it's thermodynamics law, and it doesn't stay self-contained. You need a sort of cage to keep it so. So it's a confinement mechanism of the plasma. It seems that nature has some kind of confinement that is spontaneous and that could teach us a lot of things on how to reproduce in a laboratory a plasma of that kind. Okay, so studying natural phenomena of this kind, trying to understand the reason why it is self-contained would be a very big discovery in physics. So it's very important to study this phenomenon, whatever they are. If they are natural phenomena, to understand their physics. If they are not natural phenomena, to understand the physics of a possible propulsion. Okay, because the only way that you have a luminous phenomena in the sky is that there is a very hot plasma around a mechanical object, okay? And we know then what would happen, and so we already know how we would behave. Okay, so the only problem, the only difficulty, the biggest difficulty here is to have the funding that we need for this research. And if we want to make something good, we need at least $1 million, okay, to make the thing well, okay, because this research is not only a curiosity like many of my colleagues think. They are not informed, or they are full of prejudice or something. It should be a key project, like the big physics of astronomy and the big physics of particle physics, okay, because this one has a prominent connection with fundamental physics, which would teach us a lot of things. So it's true, it's difficult to take the data. It's very difficult because it's not like when you aim at a star, you already know the coordinates. There is the star, you point the telescope and you take the data. In this case, they appear randomly, okay? But if you put a non-stop 24 hours automatic station, which we already have in its more elementary form, then there is a high probability to take the data automatically along in 1 year, for instance, or maybe only some weeks, and we could obtain data of great importance for physics, because what I'm interested personally is not to hunt for aliens, okay? If it happens, it happens. It's very interesting, of course, but it's not my goal. Whatever they are, even if they are aliens, what is important for me is not to meet the aliens, but to try to understand the physics that they use in order to move in the sky. Okay, so what can we learn from this phenomenon from the physics point of view? This is the real importance of this research.
Right. And, you know, along those lines, and I hope that that funding will be coming in for you, because it definitely deserves to be fully funded for the sheer
Yes.
significance to mankind that it has the potential for. But along those lines, Massimo, I have to wonder and ask you, have you experienced any pushback on this? Because we know as you start researching and discovering things in the sky, then you inevitably bump into things like national security and military concerns. Have you experienced any pushback in this realm because of that?
Not seriously, but something happened, because at least up to 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there were a very strange telephone calls, okay? I go to answer, and there was only someone breathing, okay, for a long time, asking, who are you? It was threatening, but they never threatened my life or something. But it was something like a technique to keep you warned, okay, in that way. Um, there was a person who was following me, I remember, for some time, for 1 month. He was always behind me.
What can you tell us about that? What did they look like? Because in the United States, anyway, we have this lore about what they call men in black.
No, they were not looking like that. They were looking like normal people. Only one, by the way, I remember the scariest situation was in 2013, I think, if I well remember. I was in a bar with drinking whiskey with a colleague, and it was summer, about summer, and there was the same guy that was following me in another close town. He was there on the opposite side of the road. I was sitting on the table outside because it was warm, with drinking my whiskey, and the guy was there. And he was dressed very normal with short trousers and looking, staying so. So that was, yeah, a bit threatening. I was laughing because they make me laugh, these things. Exorcising maybe it is, but it happened once. Okay, but only I didn't have anything dangerous. But yes, they clearly they control, and they are probably controlling also now. I want to tell this to these guys that guys, I'm making this research not to make weapons, not to sell, even if it's possible to make weapons with this technology. Indeed, I'm not going to sell to the Russians, to the Chinese. I'm going to inform, first of all, the military. If in case we see something threatening, they would be the first one to be informed by me and by probably several other colleagues. And I said this also in 2010 in Brussels. No, sorry, it was Strasbourg, one of the two European Parliament, where I spoke, and I invited the military to share their data with us so that we can analyze. We don't need stories. We need something concrete that we can turn into numbers of measurement, like radar, head-up display data, kinematic data, radar data, so that we can help them. And if we find something threatening, we would immediately inform them about that. So I am not against the government. I am for the government. So they have not to be feared by me at all. Absolutely. Secondly, I would pass this to my colleagues and to my department. But here it's more difficult because unfortunately in the astronomy physics department, and not only those, there is still a huge stigma and a lot of prejudice, okay, against this kind of research, because they think that whatever has to do with the UAPs or UFOs, how they were called in the past, is related to ridicule. Absolutely not. It's not. In my book, I have the book that we have shown before, which is a semi-mathematical one. So it's mostly for people who have no.
Right, we see the equation on the cover here.
There are some equations, but not too much. It's a divulging book, but at high level. I thought that submitting this book to academic press, because I only wanted it published only academically, okay, not at UFO publisher, with all my respect, but I wanted to give it to the physics world. What was their answer? Some they said, "Oh, we are not interested. It doesn't belong to our plan." And in particular, one told, "Oh, would you like? We could publish it in the science fiction series." This was mocking, literally. The other one was more polite, because in general they are polite. They say no, but they are polite. And she said, we acknowledge your big effort, your rigor, and the way in which you write is very nice, but the content of the book doesn't fit the plan of our press. So they do not want to consider this research at all. So we have to find another way. We have to have the big luck to make a huge discovery, which probably they wouldn't even recognize, and hope that this stigma vanishes. But so far, inside the university, there is nothing has changed, at least in my experience. There is a big changement, especially in the United States, with the release of documents, of big opening by pilots, control tower employers. There is a big change, a big opening, okay? But inside the academic world, nothing has changed so far.
Right. And I did wonder if, for example, in Italy and other parts of Europe, if the United States' decision to begin releasing some UFO files, and by the way, the government said that the website, which you can find the show description to get to those files, since its release 2 weeks ago, Massimo, has been visited 1 billion times. And so the thinking is, hey, you know what? And you know how politics works. This is a popular topic. This is proven to be something the general public wants to know much more about. So I wondered, is it known about there where you are, the UFO files? Is it a topic of discussion?
It is, but there is not much interest in my country so far, and this makes me very angry because sometimes, yes, they just mention in television that yes, there was this opening in the United States, but they mention this not like a very important news, but like a curiosity, you know that. So that's not a good way, okay, of saying the things. I have some comments about the files that being released. I saw the most important video. There are 27 videos, I think, so far. And well, it can be everything because you see it's a light that is moving, but that light could be everything. Could be an insect, a bird. It could be. It doesn't show. It doesn't demonstrate it is a flying object. Okay, only in 1 or 2 cases you see a structure very clearly, but in all the other cases it doesn't show much. It was a big disappointing so far. So
Right.
I hope that they release, probably they want to make it gradually, okay, they release something more interesting that is able to convince especially us scientists more. And I would be happy if the government, your government, but also my government in Europe also is able to release some technical data that gives some radar numbers related to radar, magnetic fields, intensity, all these things, all how they vary with time regarding this phenomena, because we could put this data on a chart and see how it behaves. Okay, so we can do constructive work because our work is quantitative. It's not sufficient that we see videos. Okay, we can also study quantitatively videos, but we need more. Okay, not only video but also radar data, for instance. So it would be interesting if they can release also this kind of data.
Oh, yeah. That's one of the most frustrating things to a lot of us, and I'm sure to scientists such as yourself, is that some of these videos, which actually do have some real physical structures in them, which you can see quite clearly, they redact all the metadata. Every single scrap of data is gone. So they don't, which I can understand. Okay, if you need to keep the exact platform that recorded this secret, okay, fine. If you need to keep the exact location of a military base secret, that's fine. But to not tell us where you're at, what time it is, what the altitude of anything is, um, nothing at all. That is very frustrating because actually one video, which I was impressed with very much initially, and kind of reminds me of some of your research because we kind of see an orb, a ball of light moving around. We shared this. It was quite popular on our YouTube channel. We have an object that enters a field of
I saw
turbines.
it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then you see all the black rectangles there? That's all the data you would need to be able to calculate
exactly.
some really amazing information about
Absolutely.
this. And so
But
that is so
yeah,
frustrating. And
absolutely.
then you add in the fact that it allows people to say, well, you know what you're really seeing here is just the parallax effect, because they say, well, to our what we're seeing, it looks like it's moving through these physical objects, the turbines, and it looks like it changes speed and direction, but they're recording from a drone. This is what some people have theorized, and they say, well, it's not really doing any of those things. It's just moving in a straight line because it's a balloon. But you can't fight back against that
Yes.
because you don't know anything else.
Yeah. If you don't know that the speed of the drone, if it was standing still, the direction, if it was changing angle or something, you can do anything with this kind of video. It's interesting, but it's useless from a scientific point of view. And yes, they obscured all the numbers, as well as they obscured many documents with the black ink. So they're useless. So I ask them not to put that. If you don't want to show, don't show. But to put something that is useful also to us, not only to the emotional state of people, which I do understand, but if we want to understand, we have to measure, to calculate. Otherwise, it's useless.
Right. Now, how do you deal with the sheer amount of space junk that we have in our skies? I can go out walking the
Yeah,
dog every evening about 9:15 p.m. my time, and I can be looking up at the sky on a clear night, and I just look at the stars, and then all of a sudden I'll see one of the stars moving, and this will be over and over and over again, and I just
yeah,
see one thing after another, and that's in my neighborhood, and I don't even have a very good view of the night sky in my neighborhood, but we hear discussion about things like low Earth objects, LEOs, satellites, etc. How do you, as a scientist studying this, deal with that?
yeah. I've been working at a radio telescope that, and also at the optical telescope that are following this space debris. Okay, there is a lot of things that is falling in the last years, thanks to Elon Musk, and it's Starlink satellites, because there are many that are falling. They have been induced to fall, but they think they're hundreds. They are even polluting the atmosphere, and this is not good. Um, there are many. I think in the sky, if I tell that there are 100,000 pieces in orbit, maybe I'm telling few, less than they really are, because some are pieces of satellite. There can be a big risk of collision between them, in particular with a big object like an international space stations, like the Chinese space station, like future space station. And it's a big problem for us astronomers, because when we make a long exposure of the sky from the ground, all the time you see star trails, these trails that are spoiling our images and make us think that the best way to make astronomy in the next years is to put telescopes in the dark side of the moon, or some using only space telescopes like Webb's space telescope, Spitzer or something. It's very bad. And not only, but if we wanted to study possible UAPs that are coming from space, like what has been found, for instance, by my colleague Dr. Beatrice Villarroel,
The
with
transient study?
yeah, transient, yes. It's very difficult. So you need, it's like to find a nugget between 1 million stones, okay? And so the only way is to try to use a filter that is able to distinguish them, maybe a spectrograph, maybe spectra of the object, but it's very difficult because you have to scan one by one. It will take decades to do that. So
Right.
it's not good. But anyway, there is a monitoring process in Italy from the Medicina radio telescope, which is near where I live in the North Italy, Bologna, and also from the Loiano telescope that is scanning this object parallelly with normal astrophysics.
Right. And you brought up Dr. Beatrice Villarreal, who did something we've talked about quite a bit on this podcast, the transient study, which used observatory plates previous to, so far as we know, satellite in the sky. And we were lucky to be able to speak with the co-author of that study, Massimo, and here, Dr. Stephen Brule, who is actually at Vanderbilt University, not far from us here in North Carolina. And I just thought he was a fascinating guy to talk to for sure. And that transient study is also really fascinating for sure, especially given the fact that this is pre-satellite, and I believe they found more plates from an Italian observatory, not the Vatican observatory, but an Italian observatory that had some plate data from the same time frame.
I don't know because I don't follow what happens in our observatory since I stopped working with the Institute of National Astrophysics in Italy. I didn't know about Italy, it's probable, but I know that other observatories have confirmed what Vasco project has shown. I'm interested in the correlation between the apparition of these transients with shadow Earth or something, or in correlation with the nuclear explosions. It's interesting, but some other phenomena in addition to very possible reflecting metal surface could produce the same effect, in my opinion. So we have to open our mind to other possibility. One thing is 90% true, it's real, okay, but what it is, we have to think to have several other possibilities. We could consider something like a matter antimatter crash collision that could generate a huge explosion in space. Or we could think also of something that is apparently science fiction, but in one of my papers there is a simulation that shows what happens when an object from the fourth dimension, from a superior dimension, enter for a moment inside our dimension. It would give a light curve which would be perfectly symmetric. It would be short lasting according how big this object is. So there are other causes in addition to the legitimate one about reflective surfaces. So it's very interesting, and I support this research very strongly.
Well, I'm so glad to be joined by Dr. Massimo Teodorani. Massimo, thanks so much for being so generous with your time and coming on with All Things Unexplained.
Thank you for
today.
The invitation.
I want to get back to your book real quick, The Physics of the Impossible Possible, and our listeners can find this free on ResearchGate, and it is a fascinating book. Massimo, chapter 1, as a matter of fact, just gets right into it with some things that I am fascinated about endlessly, such as wormholes. And chapter 1 is actually titled Wormholes and Anomalous Aerial Phenomena When Space-Time Topology Meets Observation. So for our listeners, Massimo, people, I guess in layman's terms, what would you want to tell them about wormholes?
Well, I can tell you this. To open a wormhole, first of all, they're a consequence of the field equations by general relativity by Albert Einstein, and also Rosen, other researchers that have been studying this effect. One of the solutions of the field equations is just a wormhole, the possibility to open a gate in space-time, and it comes from mathematics. Okay, so we think that universe is mathematical, and so if we discover it from theoretical physics, namely mathematics, then we expect it exists really. I think it exists really, but there is a problem. To open a wormhole, you need an incredible amount of energy. Namely, if you want to make a mouse pass through a hole that is 5 inches, you need as much energy as the mass terrace of our planet. So it's something incredibly high. And that is absolutely inconceivable that even the most advanced civilization is able to produce that. But in my book, especially in chapter 5, I will speak of something that is quite revolutionary. And someone would say, well, what are you saying? You're mad. But substantially, recent research in theoretical physics has shown that wormholes and the quantum entanglement phenomenon are substantially the same thing. One wormhole deals with the world of matter and energy, okay? And the other one has to do with the world of information theory, quantum information theory. So if they are the same thing, and you need some energy, namely negative energy from the quantum vacuum, instead of producing it directly from the matter energy realm, you could produce changing the information code that govern it. So you change the information practically like if you are on a computer. Suppose there is God that is playing with a computer and change the information that is connected to that, so that telling, give me this kind of energy, changing the topology of space-time, literally, okay? Some other researchers thought that the best system, organized, integrated system is consciousness. This is beyond science fiction. I know that. Of course I know, but I'm very curious. Because, yes, I'm listening to all the stories that came out from the whistleblower, in particular by
David Cross.
No, the other one. Sorry, I'm getting old. I'm forgetting. I'm losing neurons. So, but anyway, they speak about psionics. Okay.
Oh yes.
It's something
Jake
that
Barber.
look. He spoke about that because he said that when he was driving the helicopter and he was about to retrieve this oval-like thing, and or before he was speaking by mind. Okay, so when a physicist like me speak about that, my colleague would say, you got mad completely. No, I'm curious, and above all, very malicious. Okay, so I'm wondering, why not? How would be possible to do that? The only way to do that as a mathematical explanation, which is inside chapter 5. You go with your consciousness, and you change the informational content of space-time. Namely, you change the topology of space-time so that it affects the matter-energy component. Okay, how do you do that? We don't know, of course, but there is a mathematics that says that it's possible, but there is, unfortunately, it's not falsifiable. Okay, so we cannot demonstrate if yes or no. It's pure speculation. Okay, but when I listen these things, I say, well, what will happen to us in the next 10,000 years, when maybe we would discover that the consciousness and matter are not separated, like René Descartes said some centuries ago, but they are part of the same framework, namely space-time, quantum vacuum, matter, energy, time, and consciousness coexist. So I have this suspicion, and maybe someone else in the cosmos found a technology to manipulate this for communication and changement of the status of matter by changing the topology of space-time. Yes, I know this is daring. I know that. It's speculation. It's not falsifiable, but I don't care. I will continue to think about that.
You know, that's okay, because I think to make great science, you have to be bold and you have to be daring. And
Yes.
what's interesting about what you just said about all those things, space, time, etc., I feel like that makes consciousness perhaps the most interesting, because it's certainly, so far as we know, the most rare, because so far as we know, we're the only example of it in the universe.
Yes.
So who knows what's possible, given it certainly seems to be a very special thing. Massimo, actually, I'm now that you brought that up, this is why I don't think it's crazy at all, because I've been hunting for something ever since it was said on our podcast. We had a guest on who was a part of our government's remote viewing program. And he mentioned that two of our scientists who were laser physicists of all things, and I've always been fascinated about how did these laser physicists cross over into dealing with things like remote viewing. But they did a study at Stanford that showed the intention and attention of the laser physicist affected the laser that was in the study. We know for sure that those two physicists did go on to study remote viewing for the CIA. But that paper, and I know for sure that they were indeed involved in high level laser physics, but where that paper went, Massimo, I couldn't tell you because it's not out there. But I think it's a very intriguing concept.
I'm curious. I would like to read it. Yes.
Oh yeah, well, you and me both.
Yeah.
If I find it, I'll let you know, because I've
Oh, thank you.
actually on the search for it, I've dug up some rather interesting things which I may share with you and see what you make of that. And we were talking about Dr. Massimo's book, The Physics of the Impossible Possible, and he was referring to chapter 5, which is called Consciousness as a Geometric Operator. You were mentioning, and I want to respect your time here. So Massimo, I would love to have you back on the show in the future to talk more about these things,
Thank
because
you
there's
very much.
so much more we could talk about. Maybe we could close with this in terms of your book, and then that would encourage our listeners to go to ResearchGate and download your book and read your other studies on ResearchGate that your book is based off of. But you mentioned this concept of the enormity of energy that it would take for a wormhole. And in chapter 1, you bring up something else, which we've talked about a good bit on this podcast, and we've had other astrophysicists on talk about it, and that is the Nimitz case. And we know that the Nimitz case itself, when you do the physics, would have required a tremendous amount of energy, and that in and of itself makes it anomalous. And you mentioned a couple of scenarios that you proposed there.
Yeah, I want to add the one thing that is very important. Studies about propulsion, like a wormhole, warp drive, have been done in the past, of course, which I could mention Dr. Hal Puthoff,
Yes.
Dr. Eric Davis. They did a very interesting work, which I studied and also mentioned in some of my papers, not in this one, but in some of my papers. And they speak about the propulsion mechanism. I'm not speaking in this book about the propulsion mechanism.
Right.
I'm speaking about how physics reacts to this phenomenon, and what are the observable that we should obtain to prove or disprove the phenomenon. So this is the physics how an astronomer think, not engineering space-time. Okay, so this is there is a methodology there, what kind of instruments we would need to find. In some other cases, so far we don't have the instruments. For instance, the consciousness part we don't have, but so far. But the others, we have some instruments. If we use those instruments and in a aimed way, we might find something very important.
That's great. And I am Dr. Mounts, we've been joined today by Dr. Massimo Teodorani. Please go to ResearchGate, check out his book, The Physics of the Impossible Possible. And Massimo, one thing I wanted to ask you is, you've brought up a little bit about your future research directions.
I can only tell you, wish me luck, because I have asked money for funding for something more on the ground, like measuring strong magnetic fields from this light phenomena. I asked money, funding to an organization, because I would like to measure the magnetic field in these lights, if it's present like I expect. So to prove or disprove. And this is just standard plasma physics, okay, and spectroscopy. So this is my practical short-term plan that I'm going to perform.
In your mind, what would constitute, for the general public, or for other scientists for that matter, definitive proof or even a breakthrough?
To find out a way to make the grand unification theory between all the forces of nature of the standard model. We have to check if the standard model of elementary particles is complete or not, or if there is a fifth force, for instance. But unfortunately, the last experiments of the last 10 years at the CERN SLAC accelerator, in my opinion, didn't bring much, except for the Higgs boson discovery, which is a huge discovery. Unification of forces, unification of relativity theory with quantum mechanics, and quantum field theory is the biggest, in my opinion, because it seems that it's bringing to consciousness, and it's something that is approaching our physics knowledge to something that has to do with consciousness and not with matter. So the future, the big discovery, will be to discover that consciousness is not a transcendent thing, but it's a physical thing that is strictly connected with matter. And this was predicted at least 60 years ago by quantum physicist David Bohm. By the way, I published a book about David Bohm in Italian and in French. And okay, there are several things that could happen. I wish they happen in the future. Especially Webb Space Telescope is already starting to discover that not all the models that we thought were right are right. Okay, so it will discover many things, like also other planets, possibly inhabited planets, possibly able to see lights, city lights from the planets. There is a lot that is expecting. So science is very important and exciting. It's the biggest exploration, and I invite all the youngsters to follow physics and astronomy in particular, but also the other sciences, and to study them very well, because they help also in life, not only if you become a researcher. So I wish everyone all the best.
I do want to ask you this, Massimo. I know this is speculative, but do you have any inclinations in regards to the phenomenon about what might be happening, about what it could really be?
I have, but it's not time to tell. I'm sorry. I
No
cannot
worry.
say now.
Hey, that's a good
I
reason
will
to come
tell
back
them.
one day.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
We'll learn more. There's a lot more to talk about. But until then, we've been so honored to have Dr. Massimo with us today, author of The Physics of the Impossible Possible, which is free on ResearchGate right now. Okay, Unexplained Ones, let's get into this giveaway stuff before we let you go. We've got lots of signed books to give away by authors like New York Times bestselling author Patricia Cornwell, Disney author David Koning, Bev Vincent, who writes in the Stephen King multiverse, friend of the show Lee Starks, Colonel Drew Miller, and much more. Just be a sub, leave a comment, and of course, if you like the video, smash the like button for me. That would really help us out. Thanks again for joining All Things Unexplained. I am Dr. Mounts, and I want to encourage everybody, spend some time this week to get off your screens. Put your phones down for a while. Head out into the woods. Look up at the skies. You may not see a Bigfoot. You may not spot a UAP, but you might just find something even more important out there, and that's yourself. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
Did the CIA write Wind of Change by the Scorpions?
As humans busied themselves about the various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
With infinite complacence, people went about their affairs, yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast and unsympathetic drew their plans against us.
All of a sudden, a stick out of nowhere landed right in front of us, and there was no tree, nothing overhead. Something threw it at us.
Yeah. What's your hot take on Travis Taylor?
I've got an exclusive for you guys if you want it about
Yes,
the Alaska.
we do.
Okay.
Dr. Taylor was revealed to be the chief scientist of the UAP task force with the Pentagon.
All Things Unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.